And I'm going to go ahead and copy my
You're
clinic
going to do
ID.
both Epic and Cerner in 60 seconds.
Yes. And now you'll see it's connected to Epic Hyperspace, which is Epic's EHR.
So that's
And
actual data coming from Epic.
yes, exactly. It's
Hey, Eric. Nice to have you. You've got a very interesting background. So, how about we start from there?
sure. Yeah, I'm a software developer. I've been a software developer for about 10 years, and 8 years of that was spent working at Epic, helping to build their EHR software.
So, right now, you've been working with us for some time now. And we've been helping a lot of clients with their integrations with Epic, Cerner, and other EHRs. Um, what are we doing today?
Sure. Today we're going to show off the Medblocks Plasma platform, which is a platform used to make it as simple, fast, and easy as possible to build integrated health IT applications that can integrate with different EHRs, and it's cross-platform, so it works with any of the major EHRs.
So, before we go into the demo, I'd like to just ask you why you started working on this solution. And yeah, you already had most of this in your mind before you came into Medblocks. And so I wanted to know what prompted you to build these.
Yeah, good question. Well, I'm interested in the health IT industry. That's where I worked, like I said, for 8 years. And I like making apps myself. I find it enjoyable. So it started as just tinkering around, making my own health apps and trying to find the best solution for that. And I expanded on it because I believe this has the potential to really open the health IT industry to third-party developers to make the industry better by innovating in ways that maybe some of the major EHR vendors haven't been able to do. So that's ultimately the goal: is to open this up for third-party developers to help innovate on the industry.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think a big EHR will never be able to do everything well. And you have so many other people out there who can innovate, who can bring more to the table. And I think it makes sense to open up the ecosystem to a wider range of people too. So cool. So let's see something.
As a really basic demo, I want to take an existing app that I've created and show how I can use the Plasma platform to integrate this with multiple EHRs in just a few minutes. And so the app that I'm demonstrating here is a very simple risk scoring app. It's called the Cambridge Diabetes Risk Score. And you can find more information about it right here. But essentially, it's just a form that a physician might use to assess a patient's risk for developing diabetes. And you can see that as we update the parameters here, the patient's score is updated accordingly. And this is just a basic React app that I've built, and I'm going to demonstrate how to use the Plasma platform to integrate that with different EHRs. So the first step would be and by the way, interrupt me if you have any questions or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
I would say this is something that a developer usually would have. It's easy to build, but they're then stuck on how to exactly integrate this with an existing EHR. That's when they usually come to us, they approach us, ask us for help. So I think this is a pretty typical application.
exactly, and it can be tricky to do the integration, but with this platform, it makes it extremely simple. So the first step would be to locate your instance of Plasma. And here I'm running it locally on localhost 3000. And you would log in. This is password protected, so everything you put in here is behind a protected gateway. And you'd go to your account. I'm already logged in here. And the first step is to create a new project here. So I'm going to create a project, and a project represents an application. So here, let's just put diabetes risk score as the type of project. And you'll select what type it is. This has to do with the authentication workflows for Smart on Fire. So this is a clinician app because a clinician is the intended user, and we'll have this app, we'll have the clinician log in before using the app. So I'm going to choose clinician, and I'm going to set the location of my app as localhost 3001/main. That's just where I'm currently hosting this sample app. Okay, you might want to edit that out. Okay, so I'll save my project. And now I've got my diabetes risk score app here. The next step is to specify the EHRs I want to connect to and the health systems endpoints that I want to connect to. So to start off with, we're going to use the Smart Health IT sandbox just for testing. And then once we're finished, I'll show you how to connect it to Epic and Cerner, which are common EHRs that people want to connect to. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a platform. And here's where I select the EHR type. We have some of the major ones listed, or you can always choose other. I'm just going to call this Smart. And I'm going to set the scope here. I'm going to go copy it. So let's edit that out. And I'm going to set the scope here to just basically give me access to everything from the patient and user contexts. And then I'm going to specify launch/patient to indicate that when I launch the app, I want to select a patient before continuing. The last step is to choose my health system endpoint. And so you can imagine that you might be supporting multiple health systems that are all using Epic, for example, and they all each have their own individual endpoints. That's where you would here's where you would configure that. So I'm just going to choose the Smart Sandbox with this quick button, and then I'm going to associate this environment with my Smart platform. Okay, so that's all the configuration that needs to be done, and now my app is ready to go and to be launched with the Plasma platform. I can quickly test that by going to the patient/clinician test screen. I can choose my project here and choose the environment that I want to launch it from. Here's the launch URL that you would use, so you could provide a link to this on your website or configure the EHR to launch this link if that's what you want to do. Or we can click launch here, and it's going to take us through the authentication workflow. So first I'm going to log in as a physician. And then since I chose launch/patient, I need to choose a patient to launch this app in the context of. I'll approve the application. And now I'm brought to my app. And it's actually working right now. It's connected to the EHR, so I can make queries to that EHR. But of course, the app looks the same as it did when I first showed it because we haven't changed any of the code to actually utilize that data from the EHR yet. For the purpose of this demonstration is I want to pull the patient's gender, age, BMI, and smoking history, and I want to pre-populate this form with those data points. So that way it just optimizes the physician's workflow. They're not required to enter these fields in because we can actually get that data from the EHR itself. And it may be possible some of this other data, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to get those 4 things.
Let's do it.
Alrighty, so the first step that we want to do is we want to install the Medblocks Plasma Client SDK, and that just gives us an SDK to work with the Plasma platform. It's optional. You can just call our REST API directly, but this makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to install Medblocks Plasma Client. I'm going to install the Medblocks Plasma Client SDK. Here we go. Now that it's installed, I'm going to import it into my project. Okay, so if you'll give me just a moment, I'm going to write some code to actually query the data from the EHR using the Plasma Client SDK. So I'm going to make a function called load patient data. And that function will take a patient ID, and it's going to load in the patient data. So the first thing I need to do is initialize my Plasma client. And I'll provide that Plasma URL. Then I'm going to get the patient information, and this is all strongly typed. So here I'm going to set my patient equal to Plasma client.read patient, pass in the patient ID. I'm going to get the smoking observations. So the smoking history is returned as an array of observation resources. And I'm going to use the Plasma client.read smoking status. That's in my patient ID here. And lastly, I'm going to get the BMI information, which is also an array of observations. So I'll say BMI observations. And the way I can do that is by calling read patient resource, specify that this is a observation type of resource, and I'll pass in the patient ID, the name of the resource that I want to provide, and any search parameters that I want to give. In this case, I want to search by the BMI code, which I've already specified right here, 39156-5. That's the code used for the BMI. So that's going to do a filter query, and I'm sorry, this should be search patient resource. So it's going to search observations on this patient that match the given code here. So now I have all the information that I need from the EHR in order to pre-populate my form. Let me just return these. And the last thing I need to do is actually pre-populate my form. So give me 1 second to do that as well. This is a React app, so I'm going to create a use effect. And this is going to be dependent on the patient ID. So as soon as we have set the patient ID, I want to run this. We will call set is loading to be true. That shows a loading spinner on the screen. And then we're going to call load patient data with the patient's ID. And then I'm just going to autocomplete this here. I'll explain it. Okay, so we're just calling load patient data to load the data from the EHR. And now that we have this data, we're going to set the fields in the form so that they are initialized properly. So the first thing I want to do is I just have it saving off the data into some state variables in case I want to use them later. So let's say save patient data. And then I want to initialize fields in the form. For this, I have a function that I've created called get params from fire resource that takes those exact fire resources. And that's going to give me the gender, the age, the BMI, and the smoking status. So with that, I can call set gender, set age, which is expected to be a string, set smoke status, and set BMI. Okay, so it took me a little bit of time to write the code, but it's not much code at all. Basically, I need to initialize my Medblocks Plasma client with the URL of the Plasma instance that I'm running. I can do whatever fire queries that are necessary to perform the actions I need with my app. And then here I'm just updating the UI. So pretty simple. And let's go ahead and save it and test it out and see if it works. I'm going to come back to the patient/clinician test. And I just remembered one thing I need to change. Last thing I need to do is set is loading to false to hide the loading spinner. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the patient/clinician test screen, and I'm going to launch the app in the Smart Health IT sandbox. Once again, I'm going to log in as a physician, Dr. Albertine Orn. I'm going to select a patient. I'll choose Jeffrey Abbott, approve. And now we'll see that I've added a header here showing the patient's information. Here's his date of birth, age, sex, smoking history, and BMI. And I have pre-populated the risk score form with that information.
That's cool. And this is coming from the Fire APIs of the Smart Health IT Sandbox.
Exactly. And this is a great sandbox to use for testing, but a lot of people want to test it out on real EHRs like Epic and Cerner. So I'll show you how to do that in just about 60 seconds. We can connect these to Epic and Cerner sandboxes and not have to change any code at all. So I'll demonstrate that. The way that we do that is we come back to the diabetes risk score project, and we need to add those additional platforms, Epic and Cerner. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to go ahead and copy my...
You're going to do both Epic and Cerner in 60 seconds.
Yes. Well, after you edit it. Okay, so I'm going to add a new platform for Epic. We'll call this Epic. I'm going to add my client ID here, and I'm just going to copy the same scope as before, paste that in. And I'm going to add a new platform for Cerner. And I need to do a copy again. And I'm going to add a new platform for Cerner and set my client ID. And the scope is actually a little bit different with Cerner. Copy this. I'll paste in the scope for Cerner. Now I have configured my client IDs for those two EHRs, which is necessary to identify this app. And then I'll use these quick buttons to add the Epic and Cerner sandboxes. And then I will just associate those environments with my Epic and Cerner EHR credentials. And that's all that's necessary. Now the app is connected to Epic and Cerner. We can jump back to the patient/clinician test screen, choose our application, choose the environment that we want to test it on, and launch it. And now you'll see it's connected to Epic Hyperspace, which is Epic's EHR. I'll log in as a physician whose login is named Fire. Choose my department. And now I'm brought to the patient search screen. So let's just choose the most recent patient, Camilla Beacon, and we will approve. And now you can see it has loaded in Camilla's information, her gender, age, everything has been pre-populated.
So that's actual data coming from Epic.
Yes, exactly. It's coming from the Epic sandbox environment. So this isn't a real person, but yes, it's coming from the Epic EHR, and the exact same process would be used to connect to a live Epic health system.
Okay. We have 30 seconds for Cerner.
Sure. So it's just as easy. I'm just going to select Cerner. The only thing that changes is my launch URL. I'm going to launch it. And actually, the client ID that I specified for Cerner is a patient-facing app, not a provider-facing app. So in this case, it's demonstrating a patient logging into the patient portal, but that also just demonstrates that the process is exactly the same for physician-facing apps or patient-facing apps. Nothing really changes in terms of the Plasma platform. So here I'll log in as Nancy Smart, who has 2 children that she's a proxy for. I'll choose her record and accept it. And in just a moment, the patient header should load with her information. There we go. So there's Nancy Smart. And this is coming from the Cerner sandbox environment, so the data might be weird. But as you can see, it's once again just as easily loaded data from Cerner's EHR with no changes to my actual application code at all.
That's really cool. I want to look at the application code again. So we have nothing that's specific for Epic or Cerner in the code, right?
That's correct. Yes. So one of the things that we do on our end is that we normalize requests based on the EHR that you've selected. So some EHRs, although they're all using Fire, there are sometimes subtle differences in how you need to make requests for each individual EHR. And in this case, we've avoided doing any type of branching in our code that would, you might see code that's checking if this is Epic, do it this way, or if this is Cerner, do it that way. Instead, we've got a consistent API that works across all the EHRs that we support, and you'll never have to make changes to your code in the sense of branching out on different EHRs.
I think it's a pretty good live demo. Usually things don't work this smoothly.
Yeah.
All right. So, Eric, so let's say that, people use the Plasma portal and they connect their application. So they have an existing application, they just write a bunch of code and they go to the Plasma portal and then configure all of their environments, right? So take me through what this will look like for an average developer integrating with multiple Epic hospitals.
Sure. So if you're a company and suppose you've got a handful of Epic clients that want to use your app and install it, the process on your end is to first register your app with the Epic EHR, and that is to go to Epic's app registration page, create an account and register your app and receive a client ID. And now that you've got the client ID, then you save it in the Plasma platform one time, and you don't really need to worry about it after that. To connect to all the Epic clients that you want to connect to, you would configure those in that environment screen, you'd configure the endpoints for each of the environments. So let's say it's Mayo Clinic, they would have an endpoint for their Fire server that you would configure. Typically with Epic, there's a test server and a prod server, and you use test for testing before you go to production. So you would probably have two endpoints there, one for test and one for prod. And those would each have unique launch IDs. And you've got that URL there, the launch URL, and you can launch that URL from anywhere that you want. You can put it on the homepage of your website, or like I said, you can embed it in the EHR if you'd like.
Application developers might have many ways of launching their application, right? They might have their own login mechanism. They may want to use Epic or Cerner as their login provider. What would you suggest, and what's your recommendation here?
That's a great question, and it's something that comes up with a lot of the requests that we get. A lot of developers have an existing user authentication system, and they want to add SSO with the EHR to basically associate users of the EHR with their identity platform. So you can stick to the workflow that I just demonstrated, which is to launch the app, log in through the EHR, and continue working in that way. However, we do provide SSO information if you want to implement single sign-on for your application. So you can call an endpoint and get the identity information about the logged in user, and you can choose how you want to implement that. My recommendation would typically be have your users log in with your existing login platform, and then provide a mechanism for them to link their account with whichever EHR is relevant. So they would click a button, link this account. They'd be brought to, let's say, Epic's EHR. They can log in there, and from after that point, you can get the identity information about that user and then link the account within your own platform.
Got it. So for people who already have something to manage their login, they just link it within their application and we get all of that information. For people starting new, they can also opt to use the Epic or Cerner as their login mechanism.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, if they're starting from scratch, they can log in through Epic and they can still get that identity information and use that as the basis for their own identity platform that they want to build.
So the Medblocks Plasma platform is on early access right now, and we do have a limited offer going on for the initial few people who want to enroll with us. And if you are looking to integrate with Epic, Cerner, AllScripts, and any of these EHRs, and you don't want to write all of the code yourself, you can give us a try and just see how it goes. And that there's a link down in the description below. You can send me an email, you can fill out the form on our website, anything is fine. Yeah, we have this new platform and we hope that it helps more developers connect to EHRs faster so that you can focus on your application and you let us take care of connecting the application to the EHR for you. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.